Good evening, everyone. We're ready. Here we go. Taking a break from a wedding that I'm at. This is why we like weddings at the Hilton Suite, because we can have a shiur and a wedding at the same time.
And it's dress formal this evening.
Pardon?
Dress formal this evening.
I know you can't see if I'm dressed formal or not on this video, but I am dressed formal.
Is it one from Shabbos?
Pardon?
One for the offer from Shabbos?
One of the offerings on Shabbos. There's Shana and Johnny. We were Shana and Johnny a big mazel tov. Okay, let's do it. Tonight, we have a whole bunch of things that we're going to see. See how much we get to. We might have a shorter shiur. Hi, sorry. We might have a shorter shiur, considering the wedding. And I said to my wife that I'm not going to go out for the full 45 minutes. I think it's wrong.
42.
However, pun?
42.
42, that's very good. Okay. The Torah tells us the following. V'haya ki Savo, we're in Parasha ki Savo, page 1069 in the Art Scroll Chumashim, or 1068 in the Hebrew.
8, yes.
Well, I said the English. I looked at Michael's page over here. I'm sorry. Hi, David. El Presidente. Hey, Brian's here. Hi, Brian. V'haya ki Savo el haaretz. It will be when you come to the land, Asher Hashem Elokecha, which Hashem your God, Noitzin lecha nachala, will give to you as an inheritance. V'yirishta v'yashafta bo. And you will inherit it and you will live in it. So first of all, it's a very interesting thing that you have. It says, God will give you the land, v'yirishta, and you will inherit it. But God will give you the land which He's giving to you as a nachala. Nachala is an inheritance. V'yirishta, and a Yerusha is also an inheritance. Is there a difference between a nachala and a Yerusha? And why is it exactly that we're mentioning this? We're saying, Asher Hashem Elokecha, that God gives you as a nachala, and then why don't we use the same noun or take the noun and turn it into a verb? Why are we trying to use a different word? And what are we exactly getting at with this idea over here? So the Kli Yakar says a very, very important thing. He says also when he said V'yirishta v'yashafta, but the very few mitzvahs that are only after Yerusha and Yeshiva, only after you have inherited the land and split up the land amongst everybody else. Why do we need that? What's the importance? What's the relevance to this mitzvah? So he says something very interesting in the Kli Yakar. The Kli Yakar says the following. He says, when you have, it's all right, don't worry, it's a wedding. They're not going to be quiet. Oh, you can't hear over them. All right, fine. Yeah. Yeah, he's very good at it. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, right. So thanks very much. Thank you, Michael. So the Kli Yakar says the following idea. The Kli Yakar says that when you don't have something, then you know to get it is difficult, or often difficult, and you try to get it, and it's not always easy to come by, etc., etc. Once it's yours and it belongs to you, that feeling changes very, very quickly. It's mine. You don't start thinking, do you know how long I had to go through getting this, and you know how many hours it took, etc., etc. It's mine. It's mine. Eretz Yisrael is the same thing. It was a long journey to Eretz Yisrael. If you think about it, Yaakov Avinu went down to Egypt, was there for 210 years. They took him out with all sorts of miracles, as we read about. Then we go through the desert, 40 years in the desert, get to Eretz Yisrael, 14 years of battles, etc., etc. It was not easy to get to this land. This wasn't something that you just got served on a plate. Once the Jewish people took over the land of Israel, what happens at that point? Where they start to feel comfortable and like it's their land. And it's good, we should feel it's our land. But they feel it's their land in a way that I'm really in charge of this place. Nobody is going to tell me what to do in my land. Yeah? Sound familiar? This is our land, and in our land we do what we want to. So here, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this is the mitzvah of Bikurim. Part of the idea of the mitzvah of Bikurim is intertwined with this idea. V'haya, and it will be ki Savo el haaretz, when you come to the land. Asher Hashem Elokecha nos lecha nachala. Don't think you're the one, I'm so great. I had this great army. I took over this land. If it wasn't for me, we'd never be able to get this land. The Jewish people with the Jewish mind and their strategies and with the Jewish might and with the Jewish courage, it was all us. No, it was not. Even thinking about the modern Zionistic state, whilst there was a lot of sacrifice and a lot of bravery and courage shown by so many people, we all know that the chances of our survival in that country in 1948, when the War of Independence broke out, what were our chances?
1%.
Were they really that,
Yeah.
were they that high? Yeah?
Yeah.
I don't know. About 1% would have been. 1967, the Yom Kippur War.
There's a miracle there. Egypt turned off the radar.
Yeah.
That's what's coming.
Yeah. I mean, there were miracles again and again. And we realized at the time, this country is ours, but it's ours by a miracle. This is not ours. Yes, we fought for it. Of course we fought for it. And we lost many precious lives, etc., etc. I'm not saying that we just stepped onto the battle and all the Arabs threw their weapons into the sand and gave up. Much sweat and toil and tears and bravery and lives went into this fight. Having said all of that, without God's help, we would have been in big shtuch.
Did Hashem give it to us in any sense in our merit?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure if there's a merit or, some people say it is to make up, in inverted commas, for the Holocaust. I don't know. I'm not sure why we received it. I'm not complaining about it, but I can't really pontificate properly about whether we merit. You mean when? In which instance? You mean here, or you mean the new modern state?
Well, it was a general point. I seem to remember somewhere, I can't remember where it is.
Yeah.
Doesn't Hashem say, don't think it's because of your merit that you've got this?
Yeah. That was a few weeks ago.
It's because he promised. That's all.
It's a few weeks ago that Hashem says that. It's not because you're such a great tzaddik. Don't stand up and say, well, of course I get the land. I mean, I'm so wonderful. God says there's nothing to do with that. It's a rishas hagoyim ha'ela. It has to do with the fact that these other nations were so evil and were so wicked. Okay? But here he says, you come to the land, Hashem gives you nachala, that God gives you an inheritance. You've not done anything really to get it or to deserve it. He just handed it to you. But then what happens? You've now taken it over as a Yerusha, which is different than nachala. It's come to you, but you feel you've earned it. And you've sat down in this land. You've made yourself comfortable. You made it your land. And at this point, you start feeling very, very much like, this is my place. I do what I want to do. This is our land. Says God, let me give you a reminder. Do you know what the reminder is? The next verse, take the first of every single fruit of every single year, which God gives you, put it into a basket and go to a place that Kodesh Baruch Hu chooses. Bring the Bikurim to Yerushalayim. And then when you come to Yerushalayim and you bring the Bikurim, then people will realize and people will know, wait a minute, this is not our land. Do you know what I have to do with the first fruits? I got to give it back to Hashem to say, Hashem, I know I didn't do anything to deserve this. I know it was really up to you anyway. And then he says, you come to the Kohen and you say to the Kohen, look at verse 3. You come to the Kohen, which will be in those days. And you say to him, Higati hayom Hashem lekecha. Higati, we'll see that soon. I have told Hashem today that I've come to the land that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has promised our fathers to give to us. Higati means in past tense. So the Kli Yakar says, what do you mean Higati? I will say. What do you mean I have said? Says the Kli Yakar, if you're willing to bring Bikurim, if you're willing to live with this thought in mind that it's not your land and that the first of the fruits needs to go to Hashem, then you've already basically made the point that we needed to make. The point doesn't need making again. That already is enough. I've already told Hashem, so to speak. Because I've already recognized his sovereignty over the land. I've already recognized that it is his land, and I need to work within his parameters, and I need to work within his country to retain his land. It's not something that I deserved. It's not something that I fought for. It's something that I received. That's the first point, and a very important point. Okay, now we get to the next one. I think this is a very important discussion to be had as well. The Torah says the following in verse 3. Uvasa ala Kohen, you will come to the Kohen asher yeh bayomim ha'im, which will be in those days. Ve'amarta elav, and you should say to him, Migati yom Hashem ashkecha. I have told Hashem, ki vasi ala arts, that have come to the land asher nishba Hashem navasein l'asas lanu, that God promised our fathers to give to us. What does that mean? You should come to the Kohen that will be in those days. I mean, who else will you go to? Well, I'm going to call it come to the Kohen that's going to be in 5 years' time. I'm going to come to the Kohen that was 5 years ago. Obviously, you'll go to the Kohen that's in those days. Who else can you go to? The guy that's there, he's who's available. So how are you going to work this? Says Rashi, and this is a very important rule. Ein lecha ela kohen shehu biyamecha kemo shehu. There's no other Kohen. The only Kohen you can work with is the Kohen that is in your days, the way it is. Meaning, and this is very important, the Kohen, whatever generation he is in, that is who there is. And what am I trying to say with this? So many times people bemoan. Do you remember in the olden days, then we had real politicians. Today, they're all puppets. Today, they all try to pander to the crowd. Today, they're all on Twitter and trying to make everybody happy, and they have no leadership, etc., etc. Is that true? Maybe. I didn't live in the other generation, so I can't really comment on today's politicians. But I'll tell you what. Winston Churchill's not alive anymore. Whether you like it or not, he's not going to be prime minister. He's dead. Many years ago. So that's what you have. That's all there is. So you can try to be nostalgic. You can try to say, yeah, but I remember the days when there used to be really, really great politicians. Good. And therefore, nothing. There's nothing else you can do other than that. You can't transpose yourself back to that generation.
Not that like Noah. No.
Yeah.
Because Noah wasn't as religious or
Noah wasn't, he wasn't as great as Abraham. I mean, that's a different discussion. Pardon?
But he was the best around at the time.
But he was the best around that there was at the time. And so God said, this is whom we save.
Yeah.
Correct. He was not as great as Abraham Avinu, but he was the best. So God said, I have to save someone. I'm going to save him. I'm going to save Noah because he's the best that there is. Right? And there's a discussion. Could he have been greater? Could he not have been greater? But Noah was the best that there was in that generation. So God said, that's what we have. You can't be unrealistic. You have to be realistic with lots of things. And people get unrealistic with all sorts of things. You know, I have a family member that wished we had a bigger house. And once in a while, this family member calls up my wife and says, you know, there's a house around the corner from you. It's only 150,000 pounds more than your house. Maybe you could wing it, but you'd have a much bigger house.
Spending your money for you.
Pardon?
He's spending your money for you.
Yeah, but I don't have an extra 150,000 pounds to spend on another house, and I'm actually quite happy in my house.
Yeah.
Could I extend it? Yeah. Would it be nice to extend? Fine, great. It would be great to extend my house. And therefore what? But I'm not going to go buy. You know, it's nice to dream. Yeah, you know what? And if I had another 750,000 pounds, maybe I buy the biggest house on Water Park Road. Okay, fine. But I don't have it. So live within your means. Live with what you have. You're not going to be able to buy people, sometimes they have these dreams. You buy yourself a car, you can't afford the car. But in your head, you have to have this car. You don't have to have this car. Be realistic. You don't have to have this house. Be realistic. And this realism comes very much also with leadership. As he speaks over here, he says, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to people who are going to or are not going to become Kohanim, and you look at the Kohen and you say to your Kohen, that's a sad excuse for a Kohen. That's not like the Kohanim we used to have. Sometimes people look at the Rabbonim, and we'll get to this in a minute. People look at Rabbonim and they say, I remember Rabbonim in the olden days. They had a stolz. They were great orators. They were educated. Today's Rabbonim, the young guys are trying to be cool and trying to sort of get into the crowd with everybody else. They're not real rabbis. And guess what? Do you know what my children are going to be saying about the Rabbonim of this generation? Exactly the same thing. And what do we say when we look back at clothes? I look back sometimes at clothes my parents wore, and you go, oh my goodness, I can't believe you wore that. But my kids look back at the clothes that I wore when I was a teenager, and they look back and say, I can't believe you wore that.
There's more than one Kohen.
Yeah, but I think what he's trying to say is that there is there are many times there's a change in status of people. And you want to look back and you say, but I remember the good old days. Great. Nostalgia is a wonderful thing. but it's not real. You mean
Can't we learn by looking?
we could learn by looking back, and we can look back and we can say, but if you cannot change the people nowadays to be like the people that used to be, so we can learn by looking back and we can change the people, and then that's a great thing. I agree with you. But if we can't, then you just have to be realistic and say, this is who there is. I can't just say, you know what? There used to be great Rabbanim. Okay, granted. And therefore what? And today's Rabbanim are no good? There are people that have no respect for today's Rabbanim because they're not as great as the Rabbanim that used to be. They're probably not. But if you have no respect for the Rabbanim today, and there's no Rabbanim of yesteryear still alive, who are you left with? You're left with nobody. And so therefore the Torah tells us, like it or leave it. And whether you think to yourself, well, but this Kohen is not really such a great Kohen, and I remember the Kohanim, they used to be a lot greater, etc., etc. True. And maybe they could grow, maybe they could become bigger. But it's not going to help you. You have to realize, you have to be real. You can only go to the Kohen that you have nowadays. You can look for the best people that are out nowadays. But you can't say to yourself, I wish I had the people from before. You can, but you won't get them. They're just not there anymore. And so therefore, be realistic. Work within whatever there is. Just have to work with that. Okay. We move on to another piece over here. So we are in verse 11. At the end of the entire thing, the end of the entire Bikurim, so you've brought the entire Bikurim and you've given it to Hashem. You've put it down by the Mizbeach. You've made your whole declaration. Now he says the following, verse 11. So no, in the same chapter. No. You've gone way too far. It's going to be on the same page even. Look for verse 11. Sorry, verse 11. Yeah, we're still on page 1068. Sorry. Okay, towards the bottom of 1068. V'samachta b'chalatov. You should be happy with all the goodness. Asher nasan lecha, that God gave you. Hashem elkecha lebesecha, into your house. Ato you v'halevi, and the Levi v'akeh asher b'kirbecha, and the ger that is amongst you. Says the Ibn Ezra. You and the Levi and the ger. What do the Levi and the ger have to do with your simcha? My simcha is my simcha. Why should the Levi and the ger and the proselyte be happy with my simcha? Says the Ibn Ezra, She'ato chayev lesamchem epriyad masla. You have to give them simcha with the things that you have. Meaning, and this is so important, many people make a simcha, but a simcha is my simcha, and everybody else out. The poor people out. My simcha is my simcha. We'll get to that. I'll tell you about that in a minute. It's interesting. So I was just at a wedding. I had a beautiful thing that I saw at a wedding. There's a young man who lives around the corner from us, whose daughter got married. This is his first child getting married. And he got up to speak at his chasana, and he said, 10 years ago, I had a seed partner from Hale. And this seed partner from Hale, very well-off man, he had this 100,000-pound car, and he was telling me about the wedding that he was putting together for his daughter, sorry. He's putting this wedding together for his daughter, and he was saying how much he was spending on this wedding. And it was a lot of money. It really was a lot of money. And my friend says to this fellow, can I ask you, you're spending all this money on a wedding. It may be a good idea, whilst you make your own wedding, to pay for a simple, inexpensive wedding of an orphan or of a poor person in Jerusalem. I can get you in touch with someone, cost something like 5,000 pounds or something, and that pays for an entire wedding. And to his credit, the man said, yeah, you know what? I'll pay for a wedding. I know people that paid. What was it? I know somebody, a very wealthy man in Vienna. I think that when he made his own wedding, he either paid for 10 or 100 weddings to be done. I'm a very, very well-to-do fellow. Yeah, he have a lot of money. You know, I think he's in the top 10, the rich list in Austria. That's how wealthy. Yeah. But he paid for a lot of weddings. He said, okay, I'm making a chasna. I might spend, if I spend £1 million on my own chasna, I can spend £1 million also on making chasnas for other people. It's not going to really make a dent to my bank account. It won't. But if I'm so happy myself, let me share that happiness. Why should I spend £1 million on my own wedding? I don't know if he did or if he didn't, but even if it's 100,000 or 50,000, why should I spend £50,000 on my own wedding when there are people that are struggling to put together a wedding for 5? So I should be happy with my wedding, and I should be willing to share the goodness with other people. And this is what the Torah is telling you. When you get that goodness, when you get these things from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, v'samachta mechalatov, be happy with all the goodness that God gave you. God didn't give it to you to hoard it for yourself, to keep it for you. I'm making a simcha. That's my simcha. Nobody else is invited. I remember when I came to the shul, I think it had stopped already by the time I came to the shul, but there was something that I really, really disliked. It seems to be that there used to be private simchas in shul.
Yeah, private
Were you here?
Yeah. No, it was before,
Private kiddushim.
Before my time. It was
Before your time.
People were very much against it, though, yeah.
People, but not everybody, because the people that made it weren't against it, right? But there was such a thing called a private kiddush. And the idea of a private kiddush was the following. You would have a kiddush in the Nat Barkley for all the people that weren't invited. A few kichels, some crisps, Bell's whiskey. And then there was another kiddush, and this was the kiddush for my friends, going on simultaneously to the little kiddush going on in the Nat Barkley room with ushis, meat platters, and kugel, and cholent, and all the goodness that you could find for all my friends, but not for the schnorrers who sit next to me in shul. We're not even talking about schnorrers here. Mm-hmm. We're talking about your own community. Mm-hmm. You're making a simcha. Share the simcha with other people. Whether you know who they are, whether you don't. There's a guy who sits on the other side of shul. I'm not talking about myself, but there's a guy who sits on the other side of shul. I've never said hello to the fellow. I don't know his name. I don't know anything about him. I don't know if he lives in Prestwich or in Broughton Park or in Salford or maybe in Crumpsall or maybe in Whitefield or in Sunnybank. Does it really matter? You're making a big kiddush. You're spending all that money on a kiddush anyway. Why not invite the entire community? I mean, thank God they didn't have them when I was here. They've stopped them. But I remember saying, I think when Wendy told me about these kiddushim, I said, if there are private kiddushim in shul, I refuse to go in. I will stay in the kiddush and the Nat Barkley. If the community is not invited, I'm not invited either.
Had one a few weeks ago.
No, it wasn't a private kiddush. That was not. The kiddush was later. It was a lunch that was after the kiddush. The kiddush, they didn't sponsor the kiddush. Afterwards, there was a lunch for people. It didn't go on simultaneously. There was a kiddush in the Nat Barkley. Later on at 12:30, 1:45, there was a different, there are many people that make lunches after there's a kiddush. So they had a lunch afterwards. It wasn't the same thing. No, we wouldn't have allowed it. Yeah, that's not what happened a few weeks ago. Well, we have, but if it would be happening at the same time, we're having a kiddush for all our friends. You're not my friend. You're not invited. Says the Torah, that's not how we do things. When you're happy with all the goodness that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you, you should share it with other people. You should be happy other people have come to me, misameach you. You should want to give them also. I have plenty of food. Come. Sometimes there's so much food left over here. I saw recently a gemach, it's called the anti-Batashchis squad, whatever they want to call themselves, which means they'll come around to your simcha when you're finished with the simcha. Sometimes in these simchas, you're left with 50 schnitzels. What are you going to do, throw them in the bin? So as a caterer, I don't think a caterer can reserve these schnitzels. I hope they can't. They don't. So what do they do with them? What are you going to do with them? So are you going to chuck them? There are people that are hungry. So maybe, okay, I can't invite every single poor person that there is in Broughton Park to come to my simcha. I understand. But when I'm finished and there's food left over, please come, take. How wonderful it is to be able to share this food with someone instead of chucking it in the bin. It disturbs me sometimes. I said to my wife, I know my wife disagrees with this one, but I said to my wife, we should have a plastic food gemach. She goes, a plastic food gemach? It's a plastic food gemach. So yes, a plastic food gemach. I go to Kiddushin, the men's side is cleaned out. The men come, they have one look at the food and dive into it. The women come, they have one look and go, look how beautiful they put it together. And you go to Kiddush and spend tons of money has been spent on all these cakes and platters, etc., where two women have taken a bite and the rest of it, what are you going to do with it?
I think years ago it went to the soup kitchen.
Okay, that's a great thing. Why not? Why not?
So she said it.
Yeah, great. Give it to the soup kitchen by all means. Give it to someone who will give it to poor people. That's why I said you put out plastic food. It'll cost so much less and it'll be so much less, You find beautiful plastic, but everyone come and go, oh, that's beautiful. Great. I'm not eating anything anyway. Okay, go back to chatting or you didn't have to throw all the food out. What about Tasha? So much cheaper. Yeah, like plastic flowers. You get plastic food gemach. I don't think that's going to go over very well.
You know,
But
I read an article.
yes.
This used to happen in medieval times.
What?
And it used to antagonize the non-Jews, of course, even more.
That what? The food thrown out?
The extravagance combined with the throwing out.
Yes, you know what? The extravagance, and this is another thing I must tell you, and I feel this sometimes. I wonder when, Baruch Hashem, we've been blessed with tremendous amount of plenty. On the one hand. On the other hand, I feel sometimes, when we have a simcha, and every car that pulls up, you have a Mercedes after a Lexus, after a Jag, after a Range Rover, and you have non-Jewish people that are watching here, passing by the shul, or watching the door, etc., and they look at this ostentatiousness, and they must think to themselves, these Jews own the world. Because if you're struggling to pay for your R-Reg car, in the meantime, there's one 16, 17, or 18 Reg luxury car after the other parked all the way around the shul, people must be making faces. I'm sure they are. And if they come inside and see some of the weddings and some of the other things that go on, the thousands and thousands of pounds that are spent on all sorts of rubbish, yes, I can imagine that it can antagonize people. People look and they say, what a waste of money. That people starving.
Every waitress sees it.
You think so?
Waitresses aren't the richest people in the world.
No. I wonder sometimes what they think. I shudder to think what they think of us as Jews. Now, you might say, oh, what difference does it make? But I think, I believe, just holding back a little bit wouldn't be so bad. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's a 9 days wonder.
Pardon?
9 days.
Oh, weddings. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 9 days, 9 hours.
Well,
It's not even a day. It's crazy to spend that kind of. What people spend on weddings, it's unbelievable.
It's just as bad the ones that spend the money and haven't got the money. And
That's even worse.
When they're in debt for years.
That's even
the bride
worse.
and groom are struggling.
Yes.
The money could have gone to them.
Yeah.
Crazy.
They could have helped them to get themselves on the property ladder.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know people that have said to their kids, I'm not making a big wedding. I'm keeping the money aside for you to be able to buy your first property. That's so much more important than blowing the money on one night and having 6 more musicians.
I can't remember the tribune of the idea that what the wedding that they spend on a wedding.
Yeah.
The prices.
Yeah, okay, but if you look, the Chronicle also had an article about it. I think they said the average Jewish wedding nowadays costs around £50,000. That's a crazy amount of money.
Yeah,
£50,000. And you know what? If a guy's got 2 or 3 daughters, he's got to come up with 150 grand to be able to pay for 3 weddings. And he's just davening, please don't get engaged. Please don't get engaged. No wonder it takes them so long to get married. Their parents don't want them getting married. Oh my God, this is going to cost a fortune.
I'm going to have to downgrade my car.
Yeah, everything. Everything.
It's like keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So now we'll just finish with this because I do need to go back in. So it says, this is also, the Rashi says actually, later on, there's a Rashi that's brought in, it's in Parasha actually. It says, later on the verse says, Hashkifa mimam kachran, verse 15, it says, God should look down from his holy place in heaven and bless the Jewish people. So Rashi in Parasha says that every time it says the word Hashkifa in the Torah, it actually means for negative things, except for in this instance. And the reason in this instance it is seen as positive is because when we give charity, it changes God's attitude from negative to positive. Charity is a most powerful thing. It's a powerful tool that we have to be able to find favor in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's eyes. We all need favor in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's eyes. Who doesn't want to find favor in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's eyes? Giving charity is an easy way to do it. Sharing with other people. We are so fortunate. We can't imagine how fortunate we are nowadays. It's unbelievable what we have. We waste so much food, which we spoke about before. Even a regular household, I think they say, wastes about 500 kilos of food every year. People could survive on this. You know, there are people in Africa that have nothing to eat. There are people in England that have nothing to eat, sadly. There are people around the corner that might not have enough to eat.
Yeah, food banks.
Food banks and Tomchei Shabbos and whatever. We're so blessed. And it's such a simple thing. If you're looking, you know, it's a teshuvah, tefillah, tzedakah, ma'avinas ra'gzera. This is tzedakah. This is what Rashi's telling us over here. When you give charity, God says, you look at other people. You have more in mind than just yourself. And if you can see the bigger picture, God starts looking at the bigger picture as well. In looking at you, God says, okay, I get it. Maybe it's not as simple. Maybe you're not only doing Averis. Let's look at it bigger. Let's get it better. If you're very, very sort of like it's me and me and me and me and me, and God says, okay, let's look at you and you and you and you. Let's see how you're doing. Let's see how you're performing. If you're bigger than yourself, then God says, I'll look at you in a much bigger, broader picture as well. So that's the ideas for tonight. Sorry we have a shorter share. I'm going to make my way back to the wedding. My wife's been on her own for half an hour.
Enjoy.
I hope she's had some good company there. Thank you very much. Please, if you enjoyed the share, like and share. Thank you for joining
Did
me.
you hear Rabbi Sachs go again with the...
Oh, it's about your